Do Germans talk about the Holocaust? And what do we learn about World War II in school? This is exactly what we are discovering today, because Feli from Germany made a great coverage about this topic. I will share with you my insights, my personal views and experiences. This video will be very long, that is why we will split this into two parts. And you can already watch the second part as well as 1670 reactions and every video from next week onto my Patreon. Thank you so much for your support. And now let's go into the reaction.
Do Germans talk about the Holocaust? What do they teach about World War II in school? And is it okay to make a Hitler joke around a German?
Around me, yes. I love those jokes.
Hello, servus, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Feli. I'm originally from Munich, Germany, but I've been living here in Cincinnati, Ohio, on and off since 2016. If you think of Germany, especially in a historical context, what comes to your mind? I bet at least 99% of you are thinking of Nazis, World War II, the Third Reich, Hitler, and the Holocaust. And rightly so. It's one of the darkest chapters in history. I know that, you know that, yet a lot of people are unsure if this is something they can bring up around me and other Germans. Some people assume that it's a
You can, but it shouldn't be like the main topic of every conversation. But Germans are, in my experience, or I am at least, very happy to talk about this because many countries have a very wrong view of about how Germany is today, and yeah.
total taboo topic in Germany, something that isn't really discussed in society.
No.
But how much of that is actually true? How does Germany deal with its dark past? What is taught about it in school? And is it okay to bring the topic up around Germans? Now,
That's exactly what many of you asked, so I'm very happy to watch this video with you.
I've answered this question in different contexts before, like in this Q&A video, for example, where I gave a quick 2-minute summary, but today I would like to dive a little deeper. I'd like to talk about how this topic has been dealt with publicly in Germany over the last 78 years since the end of World War II. I'd like to share my personal experience of how it was approached in my school and my personal environment, and I'd also like to share how other Germans from different regions and of different generations have experienced this. To do so, I asked my German viewers to fill out a survey about the topic, and I received over 230 responses that will give you guys and myself a pretty good idea of how Germans.
It is very important to say those different regions because Germany is made up out of 16 states. And every state has 3 types of schools at least, and every of those 48 possibilities have a different curriculum. So, for example, I am in Bavaria, like Feli is, but it's totally different, for example, maybe from Bremen or from Berlin. So you have always to keep this in mind.
In general, think about the curriculums and the overall approach of how we deal with our country's dark past. After the end of the war in Germany in May of 1945, the Allied powers, France, UK, USA, and the Soviet Union, divided Germany into 4 occupation zones and started the process of denazification, demilitarization, decentralization, and democratization, also referred to as the 4Ds. To denazify the country, the NSDAP, so the Nazi Party, and all sub-organizations were banned, and its laws were abolished, and all signs of the Third Reich were erased from everyday life, including books, uniforms, medals, and street names.
And please hit like and subscribe, it would help me so much.
Germany also had to make reparation payments to the victorious powers and other affected countries that were mainly paid in machinery, manufacturing plants, and forced labor. Most Germans were also subject to investigations by the International Military Tribunal that was looking to identify the different roles people played in the Holocaust and in committing war crimes. Germans were divided into 5 categories, from major offender to exonerated individuals.
We had also the reparations thing, like a few seconds ago, and that's a big thing on my channel and to most discussions. So tell me if I should, maybe in 6 months or stuff, make a big video about what this is all about.
individuals. Major offenders were tried in the first Nuremberg trial from November 1945 to October 1946, and in 12 subsequent Nuremberg trials that were solely held by the US. All in all, 36 defendants were sentenced to death, 125 received prison sentences, 23 of them for life. Not all of these verdicts were actually executed, though. A lot of the convicts ended up being released after just a few years and pardoned from the death penalty as the denazification process became more and more lenient in the Western zones. Due to the extremely high number of cases, less severe offenders were soon handed over to civilian tribunals under German administration, and it became increasingly difficult to find a balance between.
Yeah, that's exactly the thing. Many people always say, yeah, there were Nazis. Yeah, of course. That is mainly to two reasons. Many people in Germany were at the time in this party. So, of course, you can't judge them all just by American militaries. That is not possible. And the second thing is, of course, then we have so many, there are not many men anymore. I think only 1 in 3 women got a man at those times. So that's another thing. And also much less people that have experience in leading a country and stuff like this. And if they were just like a member and not like active, it was more seen as okay. I know in our today perspective that wouldn't be okay, and we're very glad that it isn't. But at the time, what should you do? Just let kids rule the country? Also not so good, right?
Punishment and rebuilding the country, for which the occupying powers needed to fill a lot of important positions. And having hundreds of thousands of Germans in internment camps didn't exactly make that easy. Now, together with the development of the Cold War, during which West Germany was considered an important ally, the focus quickly started shifting away from strict denazification and more towards rehabilitation. By 1948, countless trials were ceased or never started, and as I said, lots of people were pardoned, which to this day is heavily criticized, as it meant that people that used to be active members of the Nazi Party
Please don't get me wrong. I don't say that this was the right decision, but I can understand why they did it.
Ended up keeping their high-ranking jobs and remained in positions of power in the newly founded West German Republic. In the Soviet occupation zone, denazification was followed through a lot more strictly and quickly. By spring of 1948, they had fired and replaced over 500,000 people. But how did the Germans themselves deal with the war and this dark chapter moving forward? Well, for the first 2 decades after the war, it pretty much just wasn't talked about at all. The country was full of people who were actively involved in the crimes of the Third Reich, and most common way of dealing with it was silence. Most of them weren't willing to face their own guilt, let alone take responsibility for their actions, and their families often preferred staying in the dark about how badly their own spouses, parents, and grandparents.
Yeah, it was mostly like, we don't talk about those 12 years. And I'm glad that this changed then in the 68s.
Were really involved in it all. Same thing applied to schools. Many of the teachers were formally involved with the Nazis, and the details of the Third Reich were barely part of the curriculum. It wasn't really until the 1960s that young adults in Germany started demanding from their elders to take responsibility for their past and to start an open public dialogue. Some of this was part of the 1968 student movements in West Germany that arose parallel to protests all over the world at the time. The outrage was partly triggered by different events that had taken place throughout the 60s, including the so-called swastika epidemic, the Eichmann trial, the Frankfurt Auschwitz trial, the debate about the imminent statute of limitations of NS crimes, and the election of a former Nazi Party member, Kurt Georg Kiesinger, as chancellor. As a result,
We don't cover most of them or all of them at all in history lessons, because at the time we are, of course, way more in the head of, hey, what's like DDR, what is BRD, what is there, the Cold War, and in the 60s this was way more prevalent than those little things.
Germans finally started owning up to their country's past more intensely in the 70s and 80s. Nazi Germany and the Holocaust became a mandatory part of school curriculums, and TV shows like the American miniseries Holocaust, that about a third of the population watched on German TV, prompted people to reflect on the brutality of the genocide of 6 million European Jews and the emotional stories of the victims. Other notable productions of the time are the German war film Das Boot, as well as the French documentary Shoah, among others. Today, Germany practices a very active culture of remembrance. It's all about taking responsibility for our country's devastating actions of the past and making sure that something like that can and will never happen again.
Never
this includes
again.
that it's actually illegal in Germany to deny or downplay the Holocaust. 17 other European countries have similar laws, by the way. It's also illegal to do the Hitler salute or use Nazi insignia, unless it's part of art, science, research, or teaching, and the topic is a visible part of public life. Many former concentration camps have been turned into memorial sites that can be visited today to learn from the past and understand the scale of the Nazis' crimes. In addition to that, street names, memorials, museums, and stumbling stones commemorate the victims of the Nazi regime all over Germany. The stumbling stone.
Yeah, tell me if I should cover more on this channel about one of those things. For example, the stumbling stones, which are very prevalent in Germany. I think there's over 70,000 in whole Germany.
Or Stolperstein project was started in the 90s by German artist Gunter Demnig and entails brass plates inscribed with the names and life dates of victims that are set into the pavement outside of their last known address or workplace. You'll never know when and where. You'll quite literally...
They were like right in front of our school where I gone to, right in front of my gymnasium.
Stumble over one, which shows that deportation took place anywhere and everywhere, and by bending down to read the victims' names, you're pretty much bowing down to them to pay them respect. To this day, over 75,000 of those stumbling stones have been laid all over Europe, making it the world's largest decentralized memorial. And of course, there are countless movies, documentaries, and books that critically deal with the Third Reich and the post-war era, and that ensure...
We have a certain channel that is like make joke of that that this channel only makes Adolf dokus.
That the victims of the NS regime aren't forgotten. To this day, the historical responsibilities that Germany carries are deeply ingrained in German culture and politics. Germany has a very unique relationship to Israel, for example, and in the late 50s and early 60s, they signed contracts with Israel, with the Jewish Claims Conference, and 12 European countries regarding compensation to victims.
For this reason, Germany is a bit too pro-Israel at this point of time, I think. I can't say which party is right and wrong because this conflict is so big, but Germany tends to be a bit too much to Israel in the last few years, I think. And you clearly see this also in the media a bit. And I don't like that. You don't have to overcompensate.
Of the NS regime, some of
because
which
if I steal something from somebody and somebody steals something from somebody else, this person is still a thief.
Are being paid up to today. You'll also notice that most Germans don't really have a very pronounced sense of patriotism. With the exception of sporting events like the Soccer World Cup, you won't see a lot of...
Well, now the Euros, everybody makes German flags now.
Flags, for example, not even in schools and other public buildings, unless they're government institutions. There's no such thing as the American Pledge of Allegiance, and the German national anthem is only sung on a small number of occasions. Whether
Football
that goes
games.
back to an
Or international games in every sport.
Ongoing feeling of guilt and shame, and whether or not that's still called for is actually a much discussed question among Germans. By the way, you won't find any Nazi statues in Germany. Hitler himself actually banned any kind of memorials of him from the beginning, and other statues were either taken down by the Nazis themselves to repurpose their metal for the war effort, they were destroyed by bombings, or at the latest, taken down by the Allied powers after the war. Now, what do German students learn about World War II and the Holocaust in school? Let me start by sharing my own experience. As you guys know, I'm from Munich, which is in the state of Bavaria, and I went to elementary school and then to a gymnasium there. That's important to note because the school system and the curriculums in Germany actually differ from state to state. No,
by a lot. by a lot. It's like that you even consider some grades. For example, if you have a 1, that's the best grade in Germany. In Bremen, that's maybe like a 2 in Bayern, for example. So it's not quite that hard, but it's the difference is by a lot.
29 years old, so it's been a
Bayern or Bavarian is the best curriculum, or the most hardest.
while, and I don't remember every single detail, but I do know that we started talking about the topic relatively early. I think in 5th or 6th grade, and then we pretty much talked about it all the way until graduation. And it wasn't just in history class, but in a lot of different subjects. It was a very present topic in German class, for example. In 6th grade, we read a book called Damals war es Friedrich, which is about the friendship between a non-Jew.
Die Welle is like an experiment that some teacher in the USA did, that like showed how quickly, like in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, he made his whole class and like the whole school into an actual dictatorship.
Jewish boy and his Jewish neighbor throughout the Third Reich. Then later on we read books like Die Welle, originally The Wave, which is about a school experiment about the Third Reich. And then we also read Die Schachnovelle by Stefan Zweig, as well as Andorra and Homo Faber by the Swiss author Max Frisch.
Many, I think, read Homo Faber. I haven't.
We also talked about it in religion/ethics class a lot, because yes, that's a mandatory subject in Bavarian schools.
Yeah.
In arts class, we learned about what the Nazis...
In religion, we haven't, but I can see why it's in ethics, yeah. I was in Catholic religion.
Classified as degenerate art and Arte de Kunst, and the topic also came up in the context of arts interpretations. And even in music class, we analyzed the musical and lyrical features of Nazi propaganda songs.
We like more looked into why some music was not there then.
And from what I remember, the topic was also touched upon here and there in classes like English, sociology, and geology. In history class,
also in economics, she has like geography. You mostly choose geography or economics. I have economics. Also there, of course, because like many laws were very heavily influenced by what happened there and what happened after the war, of course.
The main focus on the topic was in 9th grade. I think we spent pretty much the whole year learning about the Weimar Republic, World War II, and post-war Germany. And that's also the year where we went to the concentration camp Dachau, which is right outside.
We were in Buchenwald.
Of Munich. That's something that was mandatory at my school, and I think the same goes for most schools in the area. And then the topic was...
I lived not in the Munich area, but I think in whole Bavaria it's the case.
One of the main focuses again in history class in 11th and 12th grade. Since I grew up in Munich, we also learned a lot about the resistance group of the White Rose, Weiße Rose, since they were located in Munich. I know that Germans in other regions don't learn about them as much, but they were all students at the university.
We learned about them as well, but maybe not as much as they did.
Of Munich, same university I went to, and they were arrested and killed in their early 20s by the Nazis for distributing leaflets criticizing the Nazi regime. And their names are very present in Munich to this day, especially the siblings Hans and Sophie Scholl, but also Willy Graf, Christoph Probst, Kurt Huber, and Alexander Schmorell. Overall, I feel like there was a lot of focus on...
That is more like, we know the Scholz, but we don't know like many others then. That is like, we don't do it as much in depth.
Suffering of the Jews and how cruel and inhumane things were. We also learned a lot about Nazi propaganda and about the political, economic, and cultural factors that made World War II.
That was like, exactly, those factors were like, that was like the main focus of everything. Because they teach us how to react when this happens again. For example, now in Thüringen, when like a very right-wing party gets to power again, how we can see this, how we can see that all of those populist claims that sound nice are lies in the end, or not all of them, but they don't have something good about them, and that is very important through the whole school in Germany.
And the Holocaust even possible, and that led people to believe in such an awful ideology. I don't really remember learning a lot about who Hitler was as a person, and I don't remember talking a lot about the details of the war and warfare.
We don't know anything really about the war. It is very, very hard for me to remember exactly what I learned, because after that I watched a lot of videos about history, And of course, I know now how the war went through Belgium, then Vichy regime and everything like that. But I think we very barely looked at this. Maybe Stalingrad, maybe like that. And then, of course, the retreat after 43, I think, or 42. But we don't know anything about battles, about what the soldiers did, which countries were invaded first. We don't know anything about this. That is, many people always say, oh, you don't know anything about Germany versus Poland. Yeah, because this is war. That is not Holocaust. Holocaust we know it's very, very much about. But war, not so much. Because again, the focus is to see what this exclusion of people, this we are this and you are worse, can do. And the war is not really about this. And it is very important to see that this never happens again. That is why we focus way much more about the Holocaust than on World War II. Although, of course, World War II was very bad and Germany did very bad things, but it's not so important because we can't learn so much from a war, because we want to prevent a war anyways.
We definitely covered the timeline of the important
Which
events.
you can clearly see in how Germany reacted, for example, to Russia, and tried to make it like a friend, like an economy partner, like it was with France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and all of those states when we founded the EU.
Of the war, but I don't remember talking about single battles or which weapons and strategies were used, etc. And I'm mentioning this because a lot of Americans here actually know way more about all of that than I do.
Yeah.
And I think warfare in general is just a more popular topic in the US. Now, there's probably a lot from my school days that I forgot to mention, but I do remember that by like 8th or 9th grade, a lot of us were honestly getting a little tired of the topic, and we were sometimes just like, ugh, not again. But of course, looking back, it's definitely...
Especially because it come back like for like a 3/4 of a year in 11 and probably another half year or stuff like this in 12. It was always the same again and again and again and again. It was tiring. Especially because we don't talk at all about anything that happened after 1990. We don't talk at all about other topics like that, like EU or stuff like this in history. In sociology, more, but we don't talk about 9/11 or anything like that, really.
Talk about it too much than not talking about it enough. And I definitely say that by the time we graduated, we walked out of there with a strong awareness for racism, discrimination, and identifying populist and nationalistic tendencies and propaganda. Now, of course, World War II is something that you'll also be confronted with in real life outside of school, and that can be a very individual experience because depending on your family environment, your friends, the field you work in, you'll be exposed to it in very different ways. In my case, I definitely always felt relatively close to the topic because unlike most other people my age, it's not my great-grandparents that lived through the war, but my grandparents. Everyone just had children very late in my family, so all 4 of my grandparents...
Yeah, with me, it's a bit of both. My grandfather was born when he was 4. On the other side, the people were a bit older, I think. When the war ended, my other grandparent that has now died was like 11, so a bit more, but it's not like they were soldiers or anything. Many say, what did your grandparents do? My grandpa comes from Silesia and was deported by Poles, so he didn't do anything. What I know is that one of my brothers of my grandparent fell at the age of 18, I think, in Stalingrad. Yeah.
Parents lived through the war as teenagers and adults and therefore were affected or even involved in it in different ways. One side of my
grandpa, I think, can tell so many stories when the Poles come, when the Russians come and they had to hide and stuff. I'd probably tell me in the comments, should I do a video about this? Would this be interesting for you? Tell me so much. That is very interesting to know.
Family is from Upper Silesia, for example, which was German.
Also Silesia. I don't know exactly where in Silesia, but in Silesia.
Territory at the time, but now belongs to Poland. So when the Eastern Front got there, they lost their home and became refugees. They were actually part of the winter treks of January of 1945, which was his...
At the time, as my grandparent, he's still alive, told me this, I was like 12 and was like, Grandpa, can we just play and not tell any weird stories, right? 12 years old. And yeah, he probably told me everything about this, but I can't remember.
historically cold, and they fled partly by foot and then started from zero after the war, like so many people in Germany. One of my grandfathers was also imprisoned in the GDR for a few years. Now, only one of my grandparents was still alive when I was born, my grandma, but I did hear a lot of first-hand stories from her, and of course I heard a lot of stories about my other grandparents from relatives, and I read about it in their memoirs. So that's my personal connection to the topic, and maybe that's also the reason why I feel extra passionate about fighting discrimination of minorities and why I believe that war is the worst thing humans have ever invented.
I think many Germans that are not like weird AfD voters think that.
Now, since I'm not the only one of 84 million,
I think it's the perfect time to make a cut because now we have a new topic. Please tell me your experiences, what I should maybe do another video out about. I know these were questions that I had very long on my mind. Maybe should I do a video about this, about this, about this? And yeah, tell me if you like this, please. This video is, I talk way more than other videos, and most of the time it's like bad if I talk more than 10 seconds because people switch off. I think this topic needs to have more time than just 10 seconds always from me. So please write comments, share this with other people. Do stuff like this because then this video will perform very good. More people can see it. More people can understand Germany, the mind of Germans better. And yeah, that could also show me that those topics are important. And yeah, that I could do more of those videos if they perform well, of course. Tell me if you would enjoy a total video from me dedicated to this topic. Thanks so much. I hope you enjoyed it. And keep liking and subscribing. And we see each other in the next part. Bye.